Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased and honored to welcome you to our new episode of debates conducted within our new Polish-Korean cooperation known as Korea Monitor. The project is funded by a UniKorea grant financed by the UniKorea Foundation, which was allocated to the Warsaw Institute Foundation and explores the European perspective on Korean unification. I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome our today's guests, who are Mr. Han-Ul Chang, a French-Korean political analyst and the head of the Department of South Asia, the Pacific and Oceania at the Institute IEGA from France. His core research focuses on Korea, politics, and issues concerning the Korean Peninsula. Good morning, Mr. Chang.
Good morning. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. And Mr. Suming Park, Operation Manager of Korea Young Leaders Forum, former intern at the Economic Analyst Division of the Ministry of Unification of Korea. In our case, it's more like good afternoon, Mr. Park.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone.
My name is Szymon Polewka, and I am pleased to moderate today's debate titled How Europe and the World Can Support Korean Unification, Security, International Cooperation, and a Shared Future. So well, dear Mr. Park, dear Mr. Chang, dear viewers, I would like to begin with a historical perspective on the issue of unification. So, gentlemen, what historical challenges did Korea face after its division in pursuing unification? We will commence with Mr. Chan.
So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon in Korea. First of all, thank you for your invitation, Simon. I'm very glad to be here with Mr. Park and you to discuss about that interesting topic. So, to answer your question, South Korea was instituted in 1948 with their first constitutions. And 2 years after, there is the beginning of the Korean War for 3 years. So there is no possibility for both North and South Korea to discuss about reunification. They are still fighting um, and challenging the Cold War. And then at the end of the war, there is the outcome of the war, which is ruin, famine, tears, and blood. So Korea needs to rebuild economically and politically from the outcomes of the war. But unfortunately, for a long period, for decades, South Korea faced authoritarianism from many kind of dictatorship leaders. So it took times for Korea to reopen dialogue and discussion with North Korea, and yeah, it took almost 50 years to South Korea to reopen the discussion under the Kim Dae-jung presidency and the Sunshine Policy.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Chang, for your comment here. And if I may ask you, Mr. Park, for your comments here.
Okay, so I would like to start with the gratitude for Sharper. Sorry, I'm kind of like nervous before the start. Anyway, so I should thank you to Barshaba Institute for making this really big session. And what I like to want to say in the first place is that I only recently became interested in North Korea, so I'm not an expert, and I am really gratitude to have like broadened my perspective while working at the Ministry of Unification. Therefore, I am really eager to share and learn a lot of in this session too, just like you. So before we begin, I'd like to make it clear that what I'm going to express is solely my personal opinion and not the perspective of the organization that I work by or the Ministry of Unification or like Korean government. So Just like Mr. Chang have already mentioned, South Korea and North Korea became ideologically divided and materialized like violently within the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950. So South Korea has like several problems, but I think South Koreans like domestic political situation also imposed various like burdens on unification efforts. Like during the military regimes of the 1960s to 1980s, unification was the often employed as a tool to reinforce the political legitimacy. So under the banner of the anti-communism, discussions in about unification were like narrowly framed, and state-led narratives dominated the public discourse. At the time, the predecessor of today's Korea's Ministry of Unification, the National Unification Board, functioned less as a policymaking and implementation body and more as an ideological apparatus for the anti-communist education. As a result, rather than fostering national consensus, unification policy often followed unilateral approaches, weakening policy continuity and limiting the development of a broader public disclosure on unification. And furthermore, North Korea's closed political system and resistance to change have posed significant obstacles to unification too. For decades, the North Korean has minimized contact with the outside world, and it's one-man dictatorship under the ideology. In such a system, inter-Korean dialogue and exchanges have been frequently suspended or like severely limited. On numerous occasions, North Korea has unilaterally broken agreements or provoked military confrontation, as we have seen in events such as like shelling in Yongbyon Island or like sinking the South Korean NATO or sending balloons like last year. These actions have rapidly pushed inter-Korean relations back into the high-tension phases. And finally, I would like to mention is that the Korean unification is not solely a domestic matter to South Korea, but one deeply intertwined within the interest of the international community. South Korea maintains a strategic alliance with the United States, Japan, and European countries, while North Korea aligns with China and mostly in this area like Russia. The diplomatic interest and security strategies of these major powers have directly influenced the conditions for the unification. In particular, the geopolitical consideration of surrounding powers have led them to view the Korean unification through the lens of their own national interests. That is why the South Korea faces diplomatic, yeah, complexities and limitation in pursuing a unification strategy. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So as we know, historically, the early years of Korean division were marked by the strong U.S. domination in the south and the influence of the Soviet Union and China, what you already, Mr. Pang, mentioned, in north. So was the influence of the other countries on the Korean states also noticeable in a later time? Maybe we will start with Mr. Park to elaborate a little bit.
Okay, so of course, the major power countries like United States and China were like major influences to the Korea, but we found out like several countries like European, Southeast Asia, or like African countries also made the noticeable dominance in South Korea and North Korea relations. Like among the European countries, Germany has played one of the most important roles in our perspective. Due to its like own experience of like peaceful reunification after being divided during the Cold War, Germany is often cited as a key reference in discussions about Korean unification. The European Union has also aligned with South Korea on key issues like such as North Korea's human rights situation and denuclearization, cooperating on sanctions and other diplomatic efforts. On the other hand, like Eastern European countries, which once belonged to socialist bloc and maintained close ties with North Korea during the Cold War era, shifted their focus to South Korea following their own systematic transitions. However, some of these countries continue to maintain relations with North Korea, suggesting a more programmatic stance in dealing with the Korean Peninsula situation in our perspective. And countries such as like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia in Southeast Asian nations have maintained friendly and balanced relations with like both in North and South Korea, often attempting to play a neutral, meditating role. Both Koreans, like North and South, also participate in the Asian Regional Forum, like called the ARF, and engage in regional cooperation through the diplomatic platforms. In case of like African countries, it's also like major in diplomatic. So North Korea built ties during the Cold War by supporting independence movements in the name of socialist solidarity and anti-imperialism. However, in like more recent decades, like 1980 to 1990s, South Korea has gained the upper hand in its diplomatic outreach access to across Africa, so largely due to its like stronger economic capacity and aid capabilities. So today the voting behavior of these kind of countries at the United Nations, especially on the North Korean human rights resolutions, has become an important variable in international diplomacy regarding the peninsula. Lastly, the Latin American countries like Nicaragua still connected with North Korea, but they are also became to like diplomatic partner to South Korea. So they're becoming to contributing indirectly to shaping global opinion about the Korean Peninsula situation and North Korea.
So thank you very much. So Mr. Chang, as we see from Mr. Park, like this more global and let's say a German perspective on relationship between like Europe and like other countries and both Korean states. May I ask you for a more French perspective here?
Yes, of course. But before, I want just to add about the German influence to South Korea. It's also politically because the Sunshine Policy instituted by former President Kim Dae-jung was largely inspired from former West German Chancellor Willy Brandt, who wants to create a policy where West and East Germany can coexist peacefully. So it is largely inspired by this will from Germany to have dialogue and exchanges and diplomatic relation. And at the end, we know that Germany reunified at the end of at the end of 80s, on late 80s. So yes, that take a huge inspiration. Regarding the French perspective, um, of course, France participated to the Korean War. They sent some troops under the UN um, command. So yes, of course, there is some ties between South Korea and France. But regarding the reunification, France took also its time to develop um, that kind of peaceful policy on the peninsula. I know that former President Jacques Chirac uh, has a strong interest to make the reunification possible. So I read an article where he was willing to bring the president of the European Parliament at that time on in Pyongyang and to discuss with the North Korean leader at that time, which was Kim Jong Il, the father of Kim Jong Un, to make a peace between South and North Korea. But afterwards, there are less diplomatic relation between France and Korea, a part of the economical and trade relations. But about the reunification issue, yes, unfortunately, there were less and less um, discussion about that between the two countries.
So, gentlemen, like giving your both roots, I would like to ask more about the Korean perception now. So, how Koreans today perceive the division of Korea? We will start with Mr. Chang.
Mm, I think, and maybe Mr. Park will confirm my says, there is a kind of generational gap about the reunification issue. Uh, I believe that people from my parents and my grandparents' generation are more uh, once more the reunification are more concerned about the reunification issue and the peace policy between the two Koreas because they lived in a world where Korea was unified. So they want to come back in that kind of, um, of position and stance. But the youth and the Korean youth uh, are more like a status quo stand has have more like a status quo stance. That means that they were born in a Korea that was already divided. So they just want to keep the situation and change because they also maybe believe that if there is a reunification, the money and the jobs could go to North Korea. And in the current political situation in South Korea, maybe it's not the right time for that kind of discussion. But among the youth, I want to also believe that there are people like me who has parents or grandparents who were from North Korea. My grandmother was born in Pyongyang before the Korean War, so I have that kind of familial heritage that was transmitted by blood, and maybe the people and the young people like me who has like North Korean roots and North Korean blood flowing in their body. They they could wish by the familiar heritage to talk more about the reunification issue. They are getting more concerned about that, but that's only my supposition.
So, Mr. Park, as a representative of the younger generation, what is your view here? And do you confirm what Mr. Chang just said?
In my perspective, I should say, kind of agree with Mr. Chen. And many Koreans today perceive division as a familiar but difficult to resolve reality. So in the past, overcoming the division of Korean Peninsula and unification were emphasized as the national task. But recently, concerns about the cost and conflict often outweigh the necessity of the unification. Younger generation, as he mentioned, they were like tend to perceive division as an inconvenient but existing state. There's also growing trend of viewing unification as merely an optional future option, not a task that must be achieved. In particular, like growing awareness of the potential economic cost and social integration challenges that South Korea would face after the unification has contributed to a rise in a negative public sentiment toward the issue. So this trend is clearly reflected in the result of the 2024 Unification Awareness Survey conducted by Seoul National University Institute for Peace and Unification Studies. According to study, 35% of respondents said unification is not necessary, which was the highest figure since the survey began in 2007. In contrast, only 37 responded that unification is necessary, marking the lowest level ever recorded. Among people in their 20s, like ages to like 19 to 29, 47.4% responded that unification is unnecessary, indicating a growing skepticism about unification among the younger generation. When we ask why they view the unification negatively, most common reasons cited were the economic burden of unification, social problems that would arise after unification, and differences in political systems between North and South Korea. These views are not based on emotion alone, but stem from realistic concerns. Particularly, recent developments such as North and South Korea and North Korea's declaration of the hostile two-state theory, its reported military support for the Russia-Ukraine war, and the continued advancement of its nuclear weapon program have made it even more difficult for South Koreans to view the North Korea as a viable partner for dialogue. So, additionally, South Korea's unification policies have often shifted drastically depending on the political administration in power, lacking long term consistency and clear direction. This, combined with the failure to produce meaningful results, rapid changes in global geopolitics, deepening social divisions within South Korea, and the growing sentiment, especially among young people, that life is hard enough as it is, has led to prevailing desire to avoid any additional burdens.
So, Mr. Punk, I would like to elaborate more for your side to ask for the foreign perspective. So, how do foreigners perceive this perspective when you discuss the topic of the division and unification with them?
I think I should honestly say, well, when discussing the issue of the Korean division and unification, as well as South Koreans' perspective on unification, many foreigners express a certain level of understanding and empathy toward the complex realities of Korean society. However, at the time, they are like often surprised by attitude that differ from what they had expected. Based on my personal experience, I have not had many opportunities to engage in that conversation about the unification with foreigners. In particular, I rarely talked about North Korea or unification with international students I met in school. Most of them came to Korea out of cultural interest or for academic purposes about Korea, about South Korea. And their perception of North Korea was largely shaped by the image of a dangerous dictatorship armed with nuclear weapons. As such, their interest in or understanding of the unification issue was relatively low. So that said, it would be accurate to say that foreigners have, I should say, I gotta need to like bring some example. So, for example, the Korea Institute of National Unification, KINU, this think tank conducted a global survey on unification perception last year, 2024, targeting approximately 9,000 people across 8 countries. Among the survey, about the half of the respondents expressed support for Korean unification. Notably, respondents from the formerly divided countries such as Germany, Vietnam, showed higher level of support compared to other nations. I think this suggests that people from the countries that have directly experienced division or war or national separation tend to have a deeper understanding of Korea's historical context and the realities of division.
And to Mr. Chang, so how do you see this issue from a European perspective, especially considering your stay in France and your interaction with Europeans?
Well, I think in the past there was a genuine interest from Europe and for the reunification issue and the peace on the Korean Peninsula. As I mentioned before, former president of France and former European Parliament president tried to make the reunification possible between between the two Koreas. But nowadays, in our current France and our current Europe, with the political situation, with the geopolitical situation, with the Ukraine war, with the economical issue with COVID, it's not like a priority for European people to be interested on on the reunification issue. And I think, and it's not just Europeans, I think globally we have that reflex, which is we wait for the crisis to happen to be interested about the crisis. We are not kind of acting before the crisis happen. We let the crisis happen and say, "Oh, see, that's happened. It's terrible," and now we react. So maybe they are waiting that the Second Korean War occurs, or to to um, to be awake about that. But I also see, because I was an international student in Korea, and I have the occasion to talk and with international students coming from Europe especially, and they know about Korea and their division, and they are also aware about the reunification issue. And some of them would like that the reunification happen, like Germany. And when you talk with German students or German people, they understand that kind of feelings that Korean people could have. So yes, it depends on which European region, and it depends on the people if they have studied on it, if they have studied on it. On my scale, and my friends, when I talk with my friends, I talk a lot about the reunification issue, so they become aware, and I think it's also a good way to make interest to people by, like, what we are doing here today, by informing people about the reunification issue and why it's important for some Korean people, and what that issue matters.
So, gentlemen, considering your remarks, what is the Republic of Korea's, like South Korean, policy on foreign cooperation concerning the unification, Mr. Chang?
Mm, I, f- I think Korean inter-Korean relation um, do not depend only on Korean states, but depend on their neighbors. Um, so China, Russia, Japan, and the United States, and they all have their opinion and all have their stance on how to deal with the Korean peninsula issues. I know that Japan and the United States are more likely to uh, to um, to a status quo position for the peninsula, so no reunification. And I think it's the same for Russia and China. So it's complicated because it's not a peninsulan issue, but also a neighboring issue that Korea has to deal. So there needs a good balance. But how do you want to balance when you have on the one side Russia, China, North Korea, and on the other side Japan and the United States, especially when you have some historical issue with Japan, so negotiation became even more difficult. Um, so yeah, but they are trying to open, I think, the gate for other diplomatic actors, and the European Union could be one of them. Uh, South Korea recently joined the Horizon 2030 program from the European Union. So, and there is still some discussion about the peace on the Korean Peninsula between the European Union and South Korea. So the talk exists, but of course it will be a long route to achieve peace, to achieve reunification in regards of the actors and the issues that the same actors have themselves.
And Mr. Park?
So thank you for Mr. Chang for your broaden our perspective. And I should say about the South Korea, Republic of Korea's for its national strategy about the ministry about the like unification, I should say. So Korea sees cooperation within international community as a key part of its strategy to achieve peace and unification on the Korean Peninsula. In recent years, like this approach has expanded into what is known as unification public diplomacy since 2010's era. This means going beyond traditional government to government diplomacy to engage directly with foreign citizens and public opinion in order to build understanding and support South Korea's unification goals. So, South Korea foreign cooperation on unification can be understood in like four areas. The country works to promote the legitimacy of peaceful unification in the eyes of the global community. This is not just about the ideology, but also about linking the issue of unification to broader international goals, such as denuclearization and the building of a peace system on the Korean Peninsula. And South Korea is making public diplomacy efforts related to unification. These efforts include a cultural exchange, academic collaboration, media outreach, and youth programs targeting not only the four major powers around the Korean Peninsula, as Chang mentioned, like US, China, Japan, and Russia, but also regions like Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. The Korean government is developing country specific strategies that take into account the political, historical, and security perspectives of each partner countries. For example, South Korea promotes unification through the lens of freedom and human rights when working with United States. Emphasize, but we are emphasizing peace and stability in Korean Peninsula with talking with China and takes a careful, balanced approach in dealing with Japan due to historical and security related sensitivities. The government is working together with civil society too, and academic institutions and youth groups to create more diverse and multi-layered approach to diplomacy. This broader cooperation helps and strengthens the international support for unification in a more sustainable and realistic way.
So, view it from another angle. Are there particular international actors or countries that have visible support for Korea's unification efforts, Mr. Park?
So in time we say like another angle. I think we should like starting to get out from the like four major powers like US, Russia, China, or Japan, then I think one of the most notable examples is Germany. As a country that experienced its own division and reunification, Germany has consistently shown interest in Korea's path toward unification. There has been active exchange of policy and experience between those two countries, and the German government has expressed support for the principle of peaceful unification, continuing cooperation with Korea on both diplomatic and academic fronts. And the European Union, EU, has similarly supported the necessity of peace and unification on the Korean Peninsula, especially through its engagement with issues such as North Korean human rights, denuclearization, and peace building. The EU has participated in UN resolutions on North Korea's human rights while also promoting cooperation with South Korea through public diplomacy and academic exchange initiatives. And in addition, like some countries has like joined MSMT from the EU, which was made for the monitor the situation in DPRK. Due to the North Korea and Russia's cooperation being more stronger, the entire North Korean sanction became too useless. These MSMT making the observer for the North Korean situation. And currently, many European countries they already joined or they giving some opinions, positive opinions to like join the MSMT. And in addition, Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam and Indonesia, as I mentioned earlier, which maintain a diplomatic relations with both North and South Korea, has shown generally positive and cooperative stance toward a peaceful unification through the strategic partners with South Korea.
And Mr. Chang, French perspective here.
I will give maybe another international actor before, which is the ICO. The International Committee of the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, because in 2018, which was one of the last image of hope for Korean peace and reunification, was the Pyeongchang Olympic in 2018. And I think the IOC contributed to this for that kind of image to happen. And I remember that when the exchange was warmer between former President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un, even the FIFA thought of a co-joint proposition for organizing a World Cup in both Korea for the 2026 World Cup. So there is the possibility, especially from international and cultural actors, to help the dialogue to be warmer and to help Korea to take a peaceful direction. So this is maybe one of the latest example that I have from international actor for helping to the Korean Peninsula peace and reunifications. On the French perspective, there is a group at the Senate, at our national Senate, which is the friendship between Korea and France, and they have every year like a debate and made a proposal to the French presidency and French government to to make France an significant actor to the Korean Peninsula peace issue. So yes, from France, there is from our national institution a work to be done to help to the process. But of course, it's just a proposal, and the proposal can be withdrawn or can be rejected. So yeah, there is some barriers, still some barriers. But regarding the question and regarding the international actor, maybe Korea should look about cultural, sports, and youth international institution to help in their dialogue with North Korea.
I would like to also add from my side that I remember very well 2018 Winter Olympic Games that took part in South Korea, and especially I remember very well this moment during the opening ceremony when both North and South Korean team went under the one united Korean flag. Such a remarkable moment. I remember it very well, and I hope that we will see those moments more in the future. But going further, so and maybe a little bit deeper, so what role, if any, you already described it, but maybe when it comes to the European Union, Europe may play in the unification process, and is there any other visible involvement from the old continent in this matter, like seeing any project that are maybe financed in Korea? We will start with Mr. Chang.
There is no kind of funding to help Korea. There is more like diplomatic help or exchanges or dialogues. We talk a lot about Germany, and we are going again to talk about Germany, but Germany is, I think, the best example of helping Korea because they know what is division and they know what is how the reunification process could occur, and they also work on Germany reunification because in the in the case the reunification happens in the next years or next decades, well, that will be a significant political, social, and economic change that South Korea and the Korea Peninsula overall has to be prepared of. So there is some kind of help from that kind of country. And I would like to say that your institute, the Warsaw Institute, read a paper about the national identity, and I learned that Poland also struggled with division during century. So and get reunification at the early 19th century. So Poland, I think they can have a kind of connection and help, and that's I'm sure that's what you are doing with your work and with that kind of the event you organize. So yes, but I wish there are more kind of that kind of commitment from European country and in the other member states of the European Union, of course.
And we also recommend our last paper authored by Monika Kwiatkowska. I think that she described very well that identity that is similar to Poland, between Poland and Korea in that regard. And Mr. Park, what is your opinion here?
Thank you for your. Sorry, I keep like a little bit nervous. Anyway, thank you for your really good opinion, and Mr. Chang. And with some addition, I believe the cooperation between Europe, including Germany and Korea, I think it's already strength. I think it's already strengthening. The cooperation between Korea and Europe regarding Korean unification can be largely categorized into like four key areas in my perspective: promoting the international legitimacy of peaceful unification, and engaging in policy and academic exchange related to North Korea and unification, establishing channels for inter-Korean dialogue and gathering information on North Korea, and lastly, enhancing security cooperation. In fact, both sides have already developed a multi-layered and practical partnership, with Europe emerging as a key supporter of South Korea's vision for unification and peace policy. So the cooperation between South Korea and European Union provides a meaningful diplomatic foundation for strengthening the international legitimacy of peaceful unification. The multilateral diplomatic platforms such as like the ASEM, Asia Europe meeting, the two sides have worked to build consensus on Korean Peninsula issues. Notably, in like last year, November 2024, EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, visited the DMZ in Korea, and he remarked that more investment is needed for peace in South Korea and North Korea. This statement, I think, it symbolized the Europe continue the interest in the situation on the Korean Peninsula and goes beyond rhetoric, indicating that Europe sees itself as a diplomatic partner in building peace on Korean Peninsula. And the policymaking and academic exchange between Korea and Europe are also active and meaningful. In my perspective, the EU maintains a strategic partnership with South Korea, deepening cooperation across like political, economic, security, and cultural sectors. So, like on the Korean side, government, institutes, and researchers, including our government, like KYLF, have actively pushed engagement with Europe, and maintaining this network is essential for ensuring long-term cooperation with EU. And I think it's kind of like sensitive and important part. The Europe serves as a potential channel for inter-Korean dialogue and a means of indirectly accessing information about North Korea. Due to its continued diplomatic relations with Pyongyang, the EU has consistently raised North Korean human rights issues in international forums such as like UN, And European experts and human rights activists contribute to global awareness by analyzing testimony from defectors and producing reports on the situation in North Korea. And several European countries, as we all know, still operate some embassies in North Korea, and some maintain academic or informational exchange through the Diplomatic Policy Institute, such as the ISDP of Sweden. These connections, in my perspective, could prove the valuable dialogue between the two Koreans, or in enhancing the diplomatic and informational access to the North Korea. And finally, in the area of security cooperation, which is kind of like hot topic between the South Korea and Europe, relationship between Europe and Korea is increasingly stretched. So, given the current security environment on the Korean Peninsula, dialogue and cooperation must be accompanied by security collaboration too. In 2024, South Korea and EU officially signed a security and defense partnership agreement, initiating cooperation in areas such as maritime security, cybersecurity, and crisis management. This move is a timely and necessary response to emerging threats, including North Korea's involvement in the Russian Ukraine war and growing cybersecurity risk. Germany also contributes to the UNC monitoring the DMZ, while Poland has deepened its defense ties with South Korea since the outbreak of the war of Ukraine. These examples highlight the interconnected nature of security on the Korean Peninsula, and I think it's going to be like more developed in the future.
And is there any room for additional international support for Korea in the unification process? We already discussed a lot about whether there is like any option to support Korea, and like what further steps can the international community take to help Korea on its path towards unification, Mr. Chang?
Well, I think today we can all say that Hallyu, the Korean wave, the Korean soft power, is well known by everyone globally, and especially from the young people. So, and they already do that. They can be like a vector of messages for the Korean Peninsula peace. I know that I remember that K-pop groups like BTS uh, gave a speech at the UN National Assembly, the UN General Assembly. So they can be like an engine for that kind of message. Korean movies as well. I remember when I was studying German during my middle school period. We watched movies about the German reunification, or when Berlin was separated, and how they communicate, and how German people um, dealt with the division. So there is, I think, a kind of power from the Korean culture and its soft power to engage more people, and especially the young people um, in global. So yeah, I truly believe that culture can be, yes, the next step for South Korea, not only to prove their existence, to prove their um, their presence, but also, like I said, a vector for more engaging and committing message toward the youth people, because they already gave that kind of messages from the music and from the movies and from the dramas. So yes, to make more aware globally, and if there are more aware globally, they are going to have more interest from the government, from our national governments and internationally. So yes, they have that tools. I don't know if it's it's wise to use the soft power for that kind of purpose because I know that it's still a debatable purpose. So, but I think they can trigger a little bit that kind of um, use of the soft power, especially when you have social media and how powerful are social media to transmit messages to transfer um, opinions. So yes, I really do believe that the next uh, possibility for South Korea to develop inter-Korean relation into smooth the relations with North Korea could be by the culture and the involvement of younger people globally.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Park?
So really do feel the same as Chang mentioned. Interest is most important thing because if there's like no interest, then whatever message that we produce, they're not going to receive it. The global interest is super important, but it is important to expand the global consensus on the value of peaceful unification too. Unification should not be seen as like solely as a domestic issue for Korea, but rather as a matter that affects regional and global peace, security, and human rights. And enhancing policy consolation and comparative research with countries that have experienced division or transition, such as like Germany and Vietnam, can be highly beneficial too. And the international community can contribute by supporting diplomatic space for inter-Korean dialogue and playing a meditating role. And I think lastly is it is crucial that the international community respects and supports a Korea-led vision for unification. Rather than trying to lead the process from the outside, the role of international partners should be to stand behind South Korea and South Korea's unification strategy and offer a consistent diplomatic and political support throughout the process. I know, like watching the global standards and international society these days, these things will not gonna be really that much possible. But I'm just hoping if the unification time happens, I am deeply hoping these kind of thing would happen.
And gentlemen, to elaborate that theme, so how do you see the chances of unification in the future? Mr. Park?
This is really typical question in the perspective of South Korean person. And when I worked at the Ministry of Unification, one of the most frequently asked question was, "Do you really think that unification will gonna happen?" I was often asked this question by people around me, and I often ask my colleagues at the Ministry of Unification as the same questions. While each person's perspective on the unification will be very slightly, but the answer that left the deepest impression on me was this. It was done by my senior worker when I was working with the Ministry of Unification. He said, like, no one knows when unification will come, but it will undoubtedly arrive at an unexpected time. That's why we must always be prepared, or at least try to prepare. I thought this statement was more than just a insight. It offered a fundamentally direction for like how we should approach for unification. I mean, indeed, the current international situation is rapidly changing, but however, I believe that the more important it is to have a mindset to prepare for unification. Unification may not be happening immediately, but if there is even a 1% chance, I believe that preparing for that possibility and laying the groundwork, it is the right attitude a nation should have. And even someone like me, who has only recently entered on the North Korea and unification field, shares this kind of sentiment, and the same holds true for those who are hard working on policy planning and implementation in Ministry of Unification. So if some people ask me again, do you think the unification will come? I would like to answer with these statement that I have mentioned earlier.
So thank you very much, Mr. Park, for that very worth remark. I would say that it was very similar case in the Germany example. I know that in the 80s, if I am right, in even in 89 there were a survey that were done in Berlin asking people whether they think that unification of Germany will appear, and I know that a lot of people just answered no. And it was such an historical surprise that just months later, the unification, like in the span of the 1 year, and just appeared. And in the 90s, we had a reunified Germany. So I also hope that the history will bring this the most unexpected moment for the Korea, that we will don't know that approach, but it just happened, and the reunification of Korea will be the truth. And Mr. Chang?
Yeah, I totally share what the statement of Mr. Park. And it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I talked with one of my friend's mother who is German, and she was a teenager when the German reunification occurs. And I asked the same question that people ask to Korean about reunification, and they state the same statement that Mr. Park just said. So it's funny that German German people and Korean people have the same mentality and on that. And yes, if if I put away everything and I just want to be an optimistic person, I would say yes. I believe 100% that reunification will happen, and I also want that happen. Just from my familiar view, I want that happen. I want to see what my grandmother lands look like. So yes, for that, sure, I really want the reunification. But if I want to be pragmatic, of course, we have to prepare for an unexpected reunification, but I prefer to say that we need to make an expected reunification because, as I said before, the change will be massive if the reunification is sudden or unexpected, like Germany before, and they are still struggling with some issue because of that sudden reunification, and with the massive gap economically, politically, and culturally between North Korea and South Korea. I don't wish a sudden reunification or unexpected reunification, even though I wished the kind of reunification. But yes, we have to be prepared, but we also have to prepare the outcome of such a change for our country and our peninsula. So, yeah, but I want to be optimistic about the issue.
And finally, gentlemen, the last but not least question. So did Mr. Park, then Mr. Chung, analyzing the processes related to unification, if unification occurs in the future, will it be driven primarily or more by internal forces, or will international support and the global situation play a determining role? Mr. Chung?
So if the reunification occur, of course there will be international interest. First of all, from the neighbor country, I think they are going to put some condition about the reunification if it happens. Um, on the denuclearization issue is one of the biggest issues that are raised by the international community. And the question will be, what are you going to do with the nuclear weapons and arms that North Korea has made have made. So that's one of the issue that the new Korea government needs to find an answer. And there is also what uh, about the American soldiers on the Korean Peninsula territory. What will happen to them after the reunification? Are they leaving? Are they staying to put pressure on China and Russia? So that kind of international question remains even after a likely reunification. So, as we discussed, we know that Korean Peninsula peace and reunification issue is not just a peninsulan or mere Korean issue, but it's a global issue. So everyone wants to put some interest on it. But obviously, I don't have like a crystal ball and to see what could happen if there is a reunification internationally. But yeah, there are also some international issue to prepare for. And as Mr. Park said in his last answer, the preparation would be really the key for the Korean Peninsula, the whole Korean Peninsula to have a smooth reunification and not like decades of negotiation and procedures. So yeah, let's see what will happen if this occur.
And Mr. Park, the last word for you.
So, to be honest, this question was the one of the most hardest question that I've received when I'm preparing this discussion, and it might be a little bit long, but I think I just need to say it. If I had to choose between the two options, I'll prefer the former, the possibility of changing emerging within the North Korea by internal force that I said, but I often find myself questioning whether either option is truly possible. From my experience, the experience of working at the Ministry of Unification, having observing North Korea's internal situation, especially in the economic situation and external environment, state control within the North Korea is becoming more increasingly strict, more than before. It's like worse that I should say. The regime has intensified crackdowns on market activities, which had functioned as one of the few remaining capitalist elements in the country. For example, the state has revived gain distribution centers through the country, which the government sells food directly to people, and while strictly prohibiting the sale of food in traditional markets. And since 2018 in COVID era, supervision over trading companies has also been tightened, reducing their like autonomy and moving toward complete state control of trade and foreign exchange. As a result, right now, North Korean citizens, this is my personal, this is based on my personal experience, and this is my personal the expression. North Korean citizens are facing conditions in which even basic economic activity and survival are severely restricted. Despite these challenges, they are still required to fulfill all of the regime's demands, like such as including forced labor and mobilization. At the same time, tightened surveillance on electronic devices makes it increasingly difficult for people inside in the country to access outside information. Plus, a social system in which people monitor each other makes it even harder to expect bottom-up changes from ordinary citizens within inside North Korea, in my perspective. If changes were to occur, I believe it would most likely begin within the upper elite in Pyongyang or from elements within inside the regime itself or military forces. However, we need to think whether these individuals would be willing to risk their positions and possibly their lives. Not even their lives, like not even just their life, their families, entire like their men's lives for systematic change remains highly uncertain. I mean, of course, the international community has continue to monitor and document North Korea's human rights violation, condemn them like publicity, conduct research on the regime, and advocate for Korean unification, these external efforts are certainly not meaningless. Yet, I remain skeptical about whether such efforts have fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape of the Korean Peninsula or brought about significant internal change within North Korea. Ultimately, if change to happen, it will likely originate from within side of North Korea. But the role of external actors in creating space for such change is also crucial. Only through the internal pressure, interplay between internal pressure and sustained external influence can the possibility of meaningful transformation in North Korea truly emerge. I should be optimistic in the end, but I think I need to say this. Yeah, that's it.
So thank you very much. And as for that, the future will reveal the direction and outcome of Korea unification efforts. And through initiatives like this, we will support Korea in that endeavor. So, gentlemen, I would like to especially thank you for your contribution to our fifth debate. And as for you, our dear listeners, I warmly invite you to our upcoming debates. Follow us and see you soon. Thank you. Dziękuję.